Might I submit to you today that we've got it reversed? That part of being a Christian and part of having God's vision is submitting our calendars and our day timers and our Palm Pilots to His will first. Saying that we're going to build margin into our life so that there is time to hear God. If there's a lot of noise surrounding you, God may be speaking, He may be showing you things, but if you don't have time, you're not going to hear it and you're not going to see it. If our focus is so much on getting that next house, or having that car, or making sure our bank account looks just so, or making sure that all of our friends are happy with us, or making sure that our church knows who we are, then we've missed God's vision because, see, our eyes are focused on ourselves, and His eyes are focused on others. And that's the opportunity we have. Being available. Look for where God's working and get on board. No excuses. No calendar conflicts. No, none of that. It's about saying, if I have eyes that belong to God, then when I see a person in need, when I see an opportunity to serve, no matter how inconvenient it is, I'm going to do it. Stacy's a great example of this. I'm not very good because I'm structured and I have a calendar and I have to get things done, or else I'll just sit on my butt all day and watch TV. But Stacy and I had a really cool experience in Gainesville once when we were driving and rushing to somewhere, and there was a homeless woman on the side of the road. And she said, "Colin, let's stop, let's stop." And I was like, "No, Stacy, we can't do that. We gotta go, we're late." So I pulled into the left lane in the turn lane, and I'm sitting here, and there's a homeless woman right there. And we keep driving. And she looks at me, she's like, "You know, we really should have done something for that woman." Her eyes were open to it. My eyes were open to it. I saw the homeless woman, but my desire was to be on time. My desire was to get what I wanted to get done. And in about 5 minutes of conversation, we realized we needed to do something. So Stacy cooked a great meal, and we brought it back. About 45 minutes later, at this point, we had totally missed our appointment, which in retrospect wasn't that important. And we tried to find this woman. Well, we couldn't find her, but we found her husband. And then eventually we found her. And we realized that not only was it a husband who was an electrician, he was a good, upstanding man that just had fallen on hard times, but they were pregnant and expecting at any time. And this woman was sitting outside in the cold in Gainesville. That's having eyes that are available. Did we miss out on some things? Yeah. Were we late? Yeah. Did I have to reschedule an appointment? Yeah. But that's what God does. But here's the second thing I think that's really important that we find in this passage, is that having God's eyes, or being a disciple, is meaning that our eyes are always global. Global, what does that mean? Well, it's a combination of two words, global and local. And the reason why I think it's so important is that in the passage, we see that there's a verse, clear as day, where Ananias is talking to God. And God says this to Ananias, "Go, for he is a chosen instrument to carry my name before the Gentiles and the kings and children of Israel." See, Saul's mission was not only to the Jews, the children and kings of Israel, but it was also to the Gentiles, which is pretty much every one of us in here. And the gospel had not been given to the Gentiles yet. Remember that. So Saul was the chosen vessel. Global eyes means that we focus not only on our global community, but our local community as well. It means that I'm not a citizen of the United States of America because my home is in heaven. And I'm not a citizen who has to look at a different person of a different culture, of a different tongue, and say that because they're different, we can't worship together, or because they're different, our worship styles are different, and because of that, we can't communicate. No. Being local means that we're always in the process of focusing on others, locally and globally. The word global actually comes from a Japanese word, dachukaka. That's how you say it. I probably said it wrong. It sounds like something I would say when I was like 4 years old. But what it really hints at is the fact that our world is increasingly getting smaller. Have you noticed that? You have a cell phone question and you call, and you get Jimmy from Bombay, right? That's what happens. And what we see is that our world is becoming increasingly smaller. That your next door neighbor might have a last name that has 72 letters to it. And that the person that you work with might have the same word for the first name and their last name. That's being global. Being global is understanding that God's vision is for the nations, and because it's for the nations, everyone counts and everyone matters. So the question that I have for you, and the question that I think we all have to ask ourselves, is how am I actively impacting the nations? Now mind you, it said go. God's command to Ananias is to go. It's not write a check. It's not pray. It's not, when you feel guilty, go ahead and do it. It's not call this toll-free number. Now all of those things are good, but what was it? It was go. It was get up from where you are and go. That's God's vision for us, is that we would be a people that's gathered on Sunday and scattered Monday through Saturday doing His work, fulfilling His vision, loving on people we have no clue who they are. It's continually removing our eyes from ourselves and placing them on Him. And the final thing that I think we can glean from this passage is this, is that disciples have blindly obedient eyes. We find in the passage that Ananias knows who Saul is. He knows that Saul has legal right to kill him because he's a Christian. He knows that Saul's mission has been to kill Christians, and that's why he's coming to Damascus. But what does it say? That Ananias departed. Part of seeing God's vision is realizing that my life doesn't matter, my bank account doesn't matter, my health doesn't matter, my safety doesn't matter, and neither does my comfort. Ananias was walking into the lion's den. Because it wasn't just Saul, it was his whole posse who didn't see Jesus too. So I want you to picture that. Saul is in some random room on this street called Straight, and Ananias has to walk down it, a Christian, place his hands on him, and pray for this man to restore his sight. Dangerous? Yes. Foolish? Absolutely. But that's what God wants for us. It's not about our comfort. It's about risking everything we have. But what happens if Ananias doesn't obey? Well, that depends on your theology. Some people would say that if Ananias doesn't obey God's command, then we never get the gospel because Saul doesn't get his eyes open and he doesn't start to preach. Other people would say that, well, God would just use somebody else. But everybody can agree on this. Ananias misses his opportunity to be part of God's vision. And that, to me, is the most horrifying thing. Because in Ephesians 2:10 it tells us this, that we are God's workmanship created to do good works in advance. That's a paraphrase, but it's on the screen. God has created us for these good works. God created Ananias for that moment, for that time, for that risk. And I wonder how many times are we so focused on ourselves and what we want and our comfort that we miss the opportunity. Ananias' ministry was restoring sight to Saul. And might I contend that we all have that ministry? You know, it really worries me that there are a lot of people that are like Saul. There are a lot of people who had a Jesus moment, but they're still blind. Who's going to be there, Ananias? Will it be us? Will we risk everything? Because what I'm talking about here is life change. I'm not talking about when I feel like it, I'll do it. I'm talking about bare bones, foolish, silly, everybody thinks you're crazy obedience. The kind that makes your stomach turn because you're so scared. The kind that makes your fingers tremble because you feel like it's going to be that awkward. That's the kind of obedience I'm talking about.